better. So yes, as you mentioned, I am involved in the Python Estonia NGO. We did the PyCon Estonia there. Sadly, I didn't do any lightning talks there, so this is the first lightning talk, so let's see how it goes. The main idea that I had was, after reading this book by James Clear, Atomic Habits, of how can this be applied to our work, and primarily about writing tests, because writing tests is something that is quite separate to the actual meat and potatoes of writing code, because writing code, you're trying to solve problems, and writing tests, it's an entirely different beast, and a lot of the tools and programs and frameworks that are there are exclusively for tests. So even if someone's quite a skilled, accomplished, passionate developer, unless they're in that environment where they are required to write tests, it's going to be hard. So the question is how to start writing tests. And from this book, actually I can put here, why do us not like to write tests? It's partly because we're lazy, as I mentioned. Also project budgets can be a case. And also maybe we don't know too much about testing. But the main reason why we write tests is because it benefits us as developers. I think anyone who's looked at developer resumes, if they can write tests, it's a major plus, because not a lot of people coming into the industry really care that much about it, but it's a major boon. And also it's a fun puzzle to figure out what's the best way to design the code that is testable, and also to find these edge cases and bring them out. So to the question of how can we apply these principles to writing tests, and first I want to just explain the 4 steps that this book outlined for how a habit is done, essentially, is that there's cue, craving, response, and reward. And a very simple example here is that this late, that's the cue. The craving is I'm feeling kind of hungry. The response is I go to the kitchen and eat a cookie. And the reward is I enjoy the cookie. And this reinforces itself, so next time I get the cue, I'll have the same craving because I know there's a reward if I do the action. And the way we can try to make these steps more prevalent, I guess you can say, is these 4 ideas which he's described here. The first one is making it obvious. Because there's a table on the cheat sheet saying things that are good for breaking the habits and for forming the habits. I'm only going to be talking about the forming habits part. But yes, the making it obvious. And this is kind of hard to do with tests, but you should, if possible, of course, put them into CI. Already established projects usually have this. But one thing that you might want to do is pay attention to your coding habits, because usually when we are developing something, we are actually testing it. We are reloading a page, we are, as the most common thing, we are running a script, we're running a function. These are essentially tests, and more often than not, they are not being written down. Sometimes it makes no sense to write them down, but often that one time, that constantly reopening of a shell and running some function is a test, especially if we're looking for some output. So remain mindful. Second point is to make it attractive, and this is something which I think requires the first bit of effort, because often these testing frameworks take some effort to get working, and they'd be quite painful on the larger projects where maybe the test suite is half an hour thing, and if you're trying to just debug a test, it can be quite pain in the ass. So good to get your IDE set up with the testing framework, whether it's PyTest or Django's testing library, whatever it is. Make it as smooth and easy and attractive to write the tests. And the fourth one is to make it easy. And this is one that I think is the most important for starting out, where you don't need to make it perfect. A bad test is better than no test. And every single time you write a test, you can build upon it. So even if the test is just using the client, testing client, to make a request to your new view, if it's giving 200, your test passes. That's better than no test, absolutely. And the last part is making it satisfying, which I think tests can be quite satisfying. We're all developers, most or probably all developers here, and we like solving problems, seeing a green check mark, having things work is just fantastic. especially when you're able to go, aha, okay, I can use this tool to solve this problem. Very satisfying. And also you can be satisfying to, if you're a student or if you're a junior, very satisfying to see your mentor, teacher, whatever, give you a thumbs up, say yes, is the right direction, even if it's, small steps. And
so in general, time is up.
General time, okay, well here are just the 4 takeaway points. So the more tests you write, the faster and easier testing will be. Don't aim for 100% test coverage, aim for a nice testing framework instead. Try to write the tests while the current CI is running, because this puts like some time pressure on maybe, because it's can be fun to make a really tiny test in 1 minute. And bad tests are better than no tests.
Do we have another volunteer for Lightning Talk? I think yes, or not? Oh, okay, great.
Where am I? Oh yeah, like looks like it works. Let's try this maybe. Yeah. And yeah, where is my? Yeah, okay, I think I'm ready. At least.
Okay, so our lightning talker is Michał Rokita.
Hello everybody, so let's say we have a very common problem, which is that we have multiple HTTP services running in containers. Not necessarily containers, but yeah, it's often the case nowadays. And we need to map them to corresponding paths or domains. So the traditional solution would be to use Nginx, which is battle tested and it has a very little performance overhead and has been the state of the art for years. But it also has some downsides, which is, for example, reverse proxy configuration needs to be included in our Docker image. So yeah, we can bundle it in our image, in our Docker file, but this is like another overhead for CI and CD. So we can mount configs using volumes, which is also less than perfect. For example, like with scaling, yeah, like volumes are a stateful thing and deploying them, like replicating, it's not perfect. And also it is very easy to make errors in your configuration. And it doesn't really support service discovery. So when you deploy something new, it can be pretty hard to add in your service. So a very modern and nice tool, which is getting very famous, and I think it's very well known nowadays. But yeah, some people still might have never heard of it. So this is why I make this lightning talk. So you have your services in very different orchestrators even. You can plug in Kubernetes, you can plug Mesos, you can plug Docker, you can plug also Docker Swarm. And the beauty of it, for example, when you use a simple Docker Compose file for this, oh, there was a certain yeah. So we define our traffic service, which is just image traffic v2.6. We say, we give it some flags enable dashboard, enable API for debugging, run it on point 80, and set some config for our Docker provider, so it can discover services in Docker. We run it in privileged mode and mount Docker socket so it can discover services. We say, map port 80 and 8080 for debugging. And we add our services in our Docker Compose file, which are very simple services which should return just the name of our service. For example, this is like a backend service. This will return that it's named backend. And we define some labels which let traffic discover our service. So for this one, we want it under path prefix API v1. And for our, for example, front-end image, we just use /, which is a very, very common case. So it's a very simple compose file, just 32 lines. And we can just run Docker Compose up. I think I'm in the, yeah, let's focus this window. Yeah, now it works. So you just run Docker Compose up. And let's see if it works, right? Use URL, so just this simple query for localhost, and it returns frontend, so it's, yeah, it's great. And let's create the API. Works, right? It's very simple, very quick, yeah. So, and also we get this very, very nice dashboard. This is like running on my local PC, the same compose file, and we can actually, for example, see our services which are mapped. I don't know if I can zoom in a bit, yeah. Like, this is what traffic has discovered. And as I said, it can use Kubernetes, it can use Docker Swarm, Mesos, and traditional HTTP services which we just define explicitly. So it's a very cool tool. Just check it out. It's open source. Documentation is very clear, and it's very easy to set up and play around with. Thank you very much.